Hey, hello there guys, Proxens here, and welcome back to another video on the channel. So today we are going to be looking at some new Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild details. So earlier today, Game Informer put up their latest issue, and it came with a lot of new details about the Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. And Nintendo Everything, I'll actually post this down below, took that all and put together all of the main details about what was actually stated in the issue. So if you want to check out the link to what I'm going to be going through right now, it's down below. It's from Nintendo Everything. It should be near the top of the description. Anyways, before we do get started, I do want to mention that there are two sections to these new details. The first section being just general stuff and stuff that relates to the world, and then the second section being something that relates to a dungeon. So once we do get to the point with the dungeon, I'm actually going to put like a little spoiler warning up because there are some minor spoilers if you don't want to know about like the dungeons and such. But stuff like the general overworld stuff, it's not spoilers since it doesn't really affect the story at all. Anyways, let's get started here. So this is mainly about how, like, the first thing is how they created the game. So up till now, Nintendo made Zelda games by taking small areas and connecting them all together. But in Breath of the Wild, what they did instead was figure out what they needed on the map, and from there, groups are created out of over the 300 devs that were working on the game to work on specific sections of the world. So instead of doing small areas and putting them together, they did groups where they worked on specific parts, and they're just building up the world itself from the groups doing different sections of it, which is pretty cool because it's like, hey, it's all connected and that's awesome. Anyways, let's move on here. So this is actually related to stables, and inside stables, Link can actually rest in a bed and restore his health in there. And that's pretty cool. And also, stables let you store your horses, meet with merchants, and meet with NPCs. And these stables are actually located throughout the world in many places. It doesn't go into detail about where, but I'm assuming they're going to be decently common. And each of these stables are actually run by a different character, which is cool because it's like, hey, you go to this stable and you meet this dude, but you go to this stable on the other side of the map and it's some other dude. It's pretty cool. And also, you can spend rupees on a more expensive bed in the stable, which gives you an extra heart in the morning. And these are like yellow hearts that you can't recover if you're hit in combat. So pretty much they're temporary, I guess you could say, but as long as you don't get hit, you have them forever. But whenever you are hit, you don't have the yellow heart anymore, and you can't recover it once you have been hit. And let's see here. If you spend time by a fire, it actually passes time in the game. So by this it means when you create a fire, I'm pretty sure you can just interact with it in some way, and it makes time go by faster in the game itself, which is cool. I'm not sure how time works right now. I'm pretty sure it's something where like a minute or something is equal to like an hour or something along those lines, but that's not confirmed yet. It's probably something that we're going to see about soon enough because the game isn't far off. It's less than, 24 days maybe? I think it's less than 24 days until the game is actually out, which is awesome. So we're going to find out more information once the game gets closer. For example, right now, because this is a lot of new information. Anyways, this is cool because it lets you go by with time faster. Like if you ever need to do something in the night, but it's gonna take a while till it becomes nighttime, you can just be like, hey, I'm gonna stand by this fire and wait till nighttime. Anyways, moving on here. This is actually in relation to the weather in the game. So the weather in the game is dynamic, and the world reacts as a result to that weather. So an example of this is like when it starts raining, NPCs outside stables go inside those stables. Another example that was actually seen in one of the trailers was that certain items aren't as effective whenever it's raining. For example, items that blow stuff up. Due to there being rain, they can't really blow the things up, so they're not very effective unless you're close range, I believe. So that's interesting to note. And also in relation to weather, there are thunderstorms. And with these thunderstorms, you can actually attract them with metal items. So you have to be really careful because, the lightning will probably strike you. So, it's not great. Not great if you have some super awesome metal suit on or a metal weapon or something along those lines. And Link can actually be killed by lightning, which is interesting. You're just walking through the game, you're in a thunderstorm, and boom, you die by lightning. Oh man, that'd be very interesting to see. That'd be very interesting to see. So yeah, that's actually kind of cool. That's actually kind of cool how the weather affects stuff in the game. Anyways, a character is actually returning in the game, and this character is Beetle. So Beetle's back, and he's selling goods, same as every other game he's been in. So yeah, pretty cool. Pretty cool. I think he was actually visible in some gameplay that was posted on YouTube. I'm not sure which video it was, but I'm pretty sure I did see him in the background while watching that video, so it was cool. It was cool. And it's cool that he's back, because now you can just go and talk to him like, hey, dude, can I buy something? Not sure what he'd sell in this, but hey, it's bound to be something. And let's move on here. So this is actually in relation to the overall difficulty of the game. So there are changes in the difficulty depending on your location. So for example, you could be in area A and it might be super easy, but once you walk over to area B, it could be super difficult. But you're able to actually avoid these areas and wait until you're stronger to actually take them on, so that's helpful. You don't have to just run in there willy-nilly and be like, hey, I have terrible armor and terrible weaponry. Oh man, this is gonna be fun, going into an area where you die instantly. You don't have to do that. You can just go over to another area, get better gear, get better stuff, and then go back to that area and try to take it on again. And overall in the game, there are actually 100 shrines, which is interesting because I'm pretty sure some of these shrines are actually boss shrines. Not 100% sure on that, but it's possible. It's possible. But from what I've seen, at least, I don't know. Because most of the shrines we've seen in like trailers or videos have been simple shrines where you just get an item and go through it. It's more of a puzzle. And I don't know how they're going to do like big dungeons. I'm pretty sure they're still doing gigantic dungeons, but I'm not sure if it applies to the whole shrine count or if it's a separate count of dungeons. I guess we'll see once we get closer to the game or once we actually get the game. And you actually have an ability to get an item that identifies where shrines are located, so that's cool. And once you actually find a shrine, you'll be able to fast travel to that shrine from wherever you are, which is something really cool because you can just be at some random point in the map, but you need to get to another area, and you have a shrine that you discovered that's closer to that area, and you just go there, and it's super easy. So it makes the game a little bit easier. And once you actually defeat a shrine, you get a spirit orb, and you're able to actually trade these orbs in for items that haven't been revealed yet. It's just like, all that's been said is like, hey, you can trade it for an item, but you don't know what item. So, yeah. And now moving on to animals, there was a team in the game from like the dev team that actually spent time handling the AI of the animals, and this means that bears, wolves, deer, and other animals move through their environment and they move through the snow, which is pretty cool. I believe there was actually a fox in one of the trailers that you could see moving, and it looked cool. Because it was a fox in snow, and it was like, hey, animals, cool. Anyways, moving on here, you can actually be overwhelmed by enemies quickly. So what I think they mean by this is that you can find an area where you find one enemy. And then you turn around and there's 4 more enemies. Then you turn around again and there's 3 more enemies. And you just get attacked and you lose. Because, like, if you were in one of those, like, little camps that have been shown in gameplay so far, where you see all the enemies, and you don't realize that there's more of them, you could probably easily get overwhelmed, and that's probably going to happen a lot. Anyways, moving on here to horses. So, horses are interesting in the game because you can actually have more than one horse at a time. So that's cool. And you actually have the ability to have, like, affection or loyalty with these horses. And this is important because, like, this can help their stats and stuff, and it can make them more loyal to you. So to do this, you actually, like, feed and you take care of your horses, and you end up raising their stats. And that's interesting because it gives you, like, a little mini aspect to the game where it's like, hey, you're playing the game itself, but you can also take care of your horse if you want to, and it does help you out in the game, and might be something I mess around with, because, like, who doesn't want to raise the stats of their horse? Except that might end up being difficult if you want to have more than one horse, but hey, it's fine. It's probably going to be fun, because it probably won't be too difficult. It's probably just giving them items, giving them, like, affection, and I don't know. Anyways, moving on here, you can actually call horses over to you, but the horse needs to be in a certain distance or certain proximity of you to actually be called. And here's something that I'm not too excited for because it might suck, but horses can be killed by enemies, and oh man, I don't know how I feel about that. Because you could get some, like, super awesome horse that you've cared for, you've fed it, and it's super cool. Its stats are great, and then you go into a battle and you lose the horse, and it would be very sad. That would suck. But I mean, it does make sense. You don't have an infinite horse. It's just a horse, and once it gets killed by an enemy, it's gone. So it sucks, but it in a way does make sense. Anyways, moving on here. So this is actually something that Ionuma, I believe, stated. So what he wanted in the game, he wanted people to choose their own path and how they played it. So because of this, there's no companion characters. And by this, it's like characters like Navi, characters like pretty much any companion character you've seen in most Zelda games, like Fi or Fi, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, but that's the companion character in Skyward Sword. Navi was the companion character in, I believe, Ocarina of Time. So, yeah, characters like that who are companions in the game. There's none of them. Anyways, moving on here. So this is actually related to the stamina meter, which is the meter you see when you're running around and going through areas. It's like the little green circle that diminishes as you do actions. So the meter itself encompasses sprinting, so when you're running and stuff, paragliding, and climbing. So pretty much if you're doing some of those actions, it actually decreases. And that's interesting because you will have to manage your stamina meter if you're trying to climb a really high cliff. So you want to make sure that you don't fall off the cliff like halfway through your climb. You want to make sure, like, hey, there's a little ledge here. I'm going to go to it and not fall off the cliff. Because that'd be a good idea. So yeah, it helps you know how you're doing. And I actually do like the fact that there is a stamina meter, since it doesn't give you infinite possibilities to do stuff. Like, you actually are confined to being able to do a certain amount of actions. So it makes the game more realistic, and I like that. And it also is kind of fun to just start paragliding and you fall. And you just fall to the world. That's going to be interesting. There's a lot of stuff I'm excited to see in the game. And also, the meter itself can be upgraded, but it's not known how just yet. So, I'm gonna assume that it's probably an item or something, but I'm not sure because it's not known. It's just a personal guess. Anyways, moving on here. Different shields actually have different speeds and levels of control when you are snowboarding or dirt boarding, like a lot of people have been doing, where you just pretty much you fall down and then you get on the shield and you ride it through like grass or dirt or snow. It's fun from the looks of it. I personally haven't tried it because I haven't played Breath of the Wild yet, but from the people who from what I've heard from the people who have played it, they really like doing that. And I'm interested to see how that goes. And there's probably going to be like a shield that's better suited for this kind of stuff. And yeah, that's going to be interesting to see. And moving on here, you can actually mine rocks. So I believe this was actually seen in a gameplay video. I'm not sure which one, but according to this, you can actually mine those rocks out and they can be sold for rupees or used in crafting. So that's interesting. And speaking of crafting, I'm not sure what you'd actually craft with those, but I guess we'll see. I guess we'll see. Now moving on to stamps. So you can use these, like you can use stamps in the game to mark areas of interest, and I believe they've been seen in gameplay footage where you could see on the Sheikah Slate that stamps were placed down, and there's a bunch of different symbols you can actually use. You can use swords, shields, bows, arrows, stars, chests, skulls, leaf, diamonds, and a lot of other symbols. I believe there's around 100, so that's interesting. You can place a marker down every time you find something cool, and you can use the same thing so you know, hey, whenever you see this marker, that's a specific thing. So it's interesting. It's interesting. So moving on here, weapons, actually. Weapons in the game. This is related to weapons. So every single weapon has a unique set of animations, and they feel different. Like they look different, and they fit with the weapon itself. So that's cool. And there are actually no invincible weapons in the game. So might get the Master Sword, but it's not invincible, so you probably don't really want to use it. So that's interesting. You can just get to the point where you actually get it, and you're like, hey, I can use this a bunch. But then you break it, and you're like, oh man, what do I do? I broke the Master Sword. That's going to be interesting to see. I do hope that they do something where the Master Sword is, like, only usable in certain situations. You can't use it normally, otherwise it breaks. So, I guess we'll see. And if it breaks, you probably have a way to get it back. Maybe. Maybe, just maybe. Anyways, let's see here. Moving on. This is actually in relation to Zelda. So Zelda can get mad at you and scold you. Yeah. I'm confused by this, but also interested to see what happens. Like, what if you do something wrong or something along those lines? Does Zelda just be like, "Why did you do that, Link? Why?" I'm wondering if it's like gonna have voice acting in this as well. So we'll see. Like if she will say something if she's actually mad or something along those lines. I'm interested in seeing this. So moving on here, you can actually get to the end of the game without seeing everything in the story, and this was mentioned in an interview, and it's also mentioned here. But you can just go through the game and get to the end, like the final boss fight, without going through the entire story. It's really up to you. You just go to the boss once you're prepared to take it on. I believe you can actually go to the boss within the first 15 minutes of the game, but it's not really recommended since there's a reason the story is like in place. It's for you to kind of get better gear. So yeah. I mean, it's probably still possible to defeat the boss somehow, but it's probably insanely difficult to do it prior to going through the entire story and getting whatever you need to actually take on the boss. So, yeah. Anyways, this is actually in relation to the development. So, according to the details here, it was actually the most difficult Zelda game to make, which does make sense since it is the largest and it is the most unique in terms of its story, art style, and a bunch of other stuff in the game. So it makes sense that it's difficult to make, especially since you can literally climb anywhere. The physics are great. Physics are difficult. So it makes sense that it was difficult to make. Anyways, this is actually the point where I'm going to have to mention that the points or details we're mentioning from here on out are spoilers because they're about a dungeon in the game. So if you don't want to know details about this dungeon, please click off because these are spoilers and they do mention stuff. So click off if you don't want to hear spoilers. Anyways, final warning. Don't want to hear spoilers, click off. If you do, then here we go. So, Game Informer was actually taken into a dungeon, and this dungeon that they were taken into was constantly moving. And I believe it's something we actually saw in one of the trailers where you could see Link walking through a dungeon that was sort of rotating. So I'm assuming it's the same dungeon. And the way this works, the way the dungeon worked, is that Link had to manipulate the mechanism in the dungeon through his own ability. So you had to use your items and stuff to just go through the dungeon. And you actually have the ability to skip dungeons if you want to and go straight to Calamity Ganon, which I did mention prior. But it's not really recommended. So, yeah. And a substance known as malice covers the dungeon itself, and Link will get hurt if he touches it. It can be destroyed by finding and attacking each pocket of Malice's eyeball. I don't know what this means exactly, but again, probably going to be something we find out. And in the dungeon, the Sheikah Slate actually serves as Link's map, binoculars, and many more things. And you can actually use the slate in the dungeon to see a 3D model of the dungeon. So you can tilt the entire dungeon from here, and it's interesting because according to this, you can slide blocks into place and open up angles. You can use paraglide to new locations in the dungeon. So a voice in the dungeon actually tells you that you need to access terminals with a slate across the dungeon marked on your map. I'm curious to see what all of this is showing, especially the thing that I mentioned prior with sliding blocks into place. That's interesting. You use the Sheikah Slate to slide blocks into place. And I'm assuming this is something sort of in relation to motion controls, since you need to move around your controller to actually slide it into place. So that's cool. That's cool. All bombs in the game are remote and don't blow up on a timer. There's a simpler approach with these dungeons in Breath of the Wild. It doesn't really say much about why it's simpler, but I'm curious to see what this is about. It might just be oh, the puzzle's not as complicated, or something along those lines. I'm curious to see what happens with this. And you can't, from what Game Informer saw, you can't actually find signature items, at least up to the point which they were in. So they didn't see a signature item like a compass or anything like that. So interesting. It's interesting to see what's going to happen with that. And in this dungeon that they were in, the Wind Blight Ganon was the boss. So a voice in the game apparently says that it's one of Ganon's own. It plays dirty, and it's apparently a giant monster. It has no face, and it has a gun-like arm, and it creates tornadoes and fires large spikes. So that's interesting. I'm curious to see if every single dungeon has some sort of Ganon-like thing in it. I guess I'm actually very interested to see that, but again, this is something we're going to have to wait for and see what happens with that. Anyways, that is it for all the details. Again, if you guys do want to check them all out in text form, they're linked down below. And I think I'm going to end off this video here. Thanks for watching, everybody. Hope you enjoyed, and as always, I'll see you all next time. Bye, everybody.